Our top focus this morning, top officials from the world's two largest democracies held ministerial-level talks in Washington after their leaders from India and the United States discussed their differences over the Ukraine war. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and the Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh met at the State Department for 2+2 format talks. The talks were held amid a raging war in Eastern Europe. Biden has been pressuring world leaders to take a hard line against Moscow. The United States is seeking more help from India in condemning and applying economic pressure on Russia for invading Ukraine. But India has tried to balance its ties with Russia and the West. Unlike other members of the Quad countries, the United States, Japan and Australia, it has not imposed sanctions on Russia. Now, India's import of Russian oil remained the point of contention between New Delhi and Washington, even though India receives little of its oil from Russia. But it did, however, step up purchases from Moscow as other democracies are trying to isolate Putin. India has bought at least 13 million barrels of Russian crude oil since the invasion in late February, compared with some 16 million barrels for the whole of last year. During a joint press conference with Indian counterpart S. Jaishankar, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that democracies should stand together to face Russian President Vladimir Putin. Blinken said that Washington is asking allies not to increase Russian oil purchases. But India's Jaishankar resisted against concerns on India's energy purchases from Russia. An Indian foreign minister said that the focus should be on Europe and not India when it comes to energy imports from Russia. Jaishankar claimed that Europe buys more energy from Russia than India does.
When it comes to oil purchases, sanctions, etc., I just note that there are carve-outs for energy purchases. Of course, we're encouraging countries not to purchase additional energy supplies from Russia. Every country is differently situated, has different needs, requirements, but we're looking to allies and partners not to increase their purchases of Russian energy.
If you are looking at energy purchases from Russia, I would suggest that your attention should be focused on Europe, which probably we do buy some energy which is necessary for our energy security. But I suspect, looking at the figures, probably our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon.
Notably, ahead of the talks, White House reportedly did state that New Delhi's energy imports from Moscow did not violate United States sanctions. White House also has added that the U.S. would be happy to help in diversifying India's energy imports. And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal is now joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us, Siddhant. What can you tell us about the discussions between the two sides and also Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar's comments on energy purchases from Moscow?
Well, it was a significant day in Washington, and we saw the 2+2 meeting outcomes, essentially on space, announcements being made on more such engagements between the American side and the Indian side. But also, if you look at the presser, the joint presser, clearly Russia was essentially the elephant in the room, and there were a lot of questions on India importing oil from Russia, something that India has defended, pointing out that it's just a very small amount of discounted crude oil, while pointing to what the Europeans have been doing. But just a short while ago, the joint statement has been released, and one of the significant part of it is the direct mention of Pakistan in the joint statement, calling on Pakistan to act on terror groups on its territory. So that is a significant win for New Delhi, even as, of course, Russia remained the top focus area during not only the 2+2, but also the virtual meet we saw between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the American President Joe Biden yesterday evening India time, in which, of course, the Indian Prime Minister talked about what India has been doing. He, of course, condemned what happened in Busha and called for an independent probe. What was significant in the comments by the Indian Prime Minister is that there have been previously meetings with the world leaders. The Japanese Prime Minister was here in Delhi. We saw the virtual meeting with the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. There wasn't any significant mention by the Indian side, while the foreign counterpart did condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In this case, both the American president and the Indian Prime Minister significantly mentioned about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, talking about several things, and of course, how to work together to stabilize the world food market, because there are huge impacts on commodity prices because of this invasion.
Right. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all your inputs on this. Also, right now, we're being joined by Les Simonson, a senior fellow at the National Security Institute from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, my first question to you, in fact, is a major bone of contention between the two sides was India stepping up its oil purchases from Moscow. What can you tell us about the impact of this on the relationship between India and the United States, and also the objective?
Well, I think it's important for everyone to remember that the U.S.-India relationship is quite strong. It has been getting stronger over the past few years. The U.S. and India share many values and interests in the region. It's clear that the alignment is not perfect, and the Biden administration is pushing India, urging India to take stronger steps in the Russia-Ukraine situation. There's no doubt. But I think overall, both sides came away with very positive statements about the relationship, because that is true, remains very strong when you consider all of the factors that are involved.
Absolutely. Now, India's remarks, S. Jaishankar did say that in terms of energy imports, the focus should be on Europe. What do you think of India's stance in this conflict?
Well, it's not an unreasonable thing to say, I think, on behalf of Minister Jaishankar. Europe does need to step up and be the leader in this regard. That would make this advocacy to other countries in other regions a little more effective, I think, if we saw that Europeans were, in fact, putting their money where their mouth is. So I think that's not unreasonable to say. At the same time, the Biden administration is trying to rally everyone it can to limit the options for Vladimir Putin to export energy from Russia.
All right. Mr. Munson, thank you so much for joining us with your insights on this.
My pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.